morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. Now, as we see almost every day, Disney is able to dominate the headlines with their multiple brands. They have Disney Animation is back in full force. They have Pixar. They have Marvel, of course, Star Wars, and their live-action fairy tales have become a very big contender in the field. They, again, just can dominate headline after headline. And it seems like some days, not just seems, it's true, that they're all we discuss. However, I continue to be surprised that the other studios are kind of contributing to the legend that Disney is quickly becoming within the industry by not only not challenging them, but actually running away from fights even when they have release dates first. And there have been a number of release date changes last week, late last week, that all have to do with Disney movies. And in every instance, it's another studio getting out of the way of a Disney picture. Warner Brothers has two of them. And they, of course, they challenged Captain America 3, but then Captain America 3 came roaring back with Civil War. And of course, Batman v Superman infamously blinked and moved to March. Hopefully that will pay off. But they're moving other pictures. They moved two pictures for Disney. Their Pan, set for 2015, moved back a week to 1 week later to come out to get out of the way of Ant-Man. I think Pan could have taken Ant-Man, but apparently Warner Brothers doesn't think that's the case, and they're more comfortable going up against three pictures. They're taking on Pixels, that's the Adam Sandler, Kevin James, Peter Dinklage, also Josh Gad, who voices Olaf from Frozen. That's like a video game action comedy. The remake of Poltergeist and Judd Apatow's Trainwreck with Amy Schumer. Those are all set for July 24th, but Pam would rather take on those three films than go up against Ant-Man. Then Warner Brothers also moved its Jungle Book adaptation, its live-action fairy tale that Andy Serkis is directing, making his directorial debut on. It has an amazing cast. That's been pushed back an entire year to give a 2-year break between that version and Disney's, which comes out in 2015. They've actually also just recently released some concept art for that, and Jon Favreau is directing that, and I think people overall are much more excited for what Andy Serkis is going to do with the material, at least I think in the movie fan internet community. But Warner Brothers, again, getting out of the way, and I think that they don't seem to understand that by moving your film, getting a new release date for it, it makes it feel like, well, if you don't have confidence, if you can't back your own horse, what confidence can we possibly have in the material? So those are the two Warner Brothers movies that have moved. Also, DreamWorks Animation moved Kung Fu Panda 3. They moved it from the holiday season in 2015 to March 2016 to get out of the way of Star Wars. And now Star Wars, of course, is all ages material, although maybe not. I think this new episode 7, I think it's going to have a lot more darker elements to it. Hey, maybe little kids are getting on the dark bandwagon as well. But I think Kung Fu Panda 3 is also hotly anticipated. Bryan Cranston does a voice, although maybe after Godzilla, people won't fall for that again, of Bryan Cranston being in a film. But, you know, Poe's dad is supposed to finally show up. That's a big movie. And the other ones have been released, I believe, in March as well, so that might be one of the, or at least in summer, that might be one of the reasons they're moving it. But I think it could have done well in the holiday season. And then also Universal, they jumped on this run away from Disney bandwagon, and they've moved Skull Island from Legendary, although that's been retitled to Kong Skull Island. I think that's a good idea to make sure people are aware that this is a King Kong film. I think this film seems great. Tom Hiddleston stars, a personality, a star that Disney itself built up, and they're getting out of the way of Doctor Strange. So I'm wondering, do you agree that this kind of puts a black eye on a film property? If a studio moves it and feels it can't compete with Disney, does that give you some pause about the film yourself? Or are you like, good call, there's no beating Disney? And also with these matchups, which one would you have chosen? Would you have chosen Pan over Ant-Man? Would you be more excited to see Andy Serkis's Jungle Book than Jon Favreau's? How about Star Wars and Kung Fu Panda 3? Could they have coexisted? And then also Doctor Strange versus Skull Island, Kong Skull Island. Which would you have picked first there? I'm just curious to see if maybe these studios are right. All right, so speaking of Doctor Strange, that's the second story of the day, and that's that there's a new round of casting rumors as they're trying to get other people to jump on this bandwagon along with Benedict Cumberbatch. Finally, we have our Doctor Strange, and this is to cast not Wong, who I would have thought would be the next big casting move for this film, but for the Ancient One. And this is the person who is the Sorcerer Supreme before Doctor Strange. That's like the Supreme Wizard, Sorcerer Supreme, obviously. And what he does is he passes the mantle on to Dr. Stephen Strange once he's trained him for the gig. But this gives me some cause for concern. And also, considering who's up for the role, this is clearly a big part in the film. Now, I wanted an origin story because I like Doctor Strange going from this really egotistical jerk of a surgeon, neurosurgeon, to damaging his hands in a horrific car accident so he can no longer be a medical doctor but becomes a doctor of the mystical arts, or mystical medicine, I guess, if you want to try and have that correlation. That's a great story. But then when I hear this idea of an Ancient One training him, I'm like, man, I don't know if I want to sit through a whole training movie. Can we just have that first introduction, introduce the Ancient One, and then skip forward to when Benedict Cumberbatch can, like, kick some magical butt? That's what I want to see. I do not need to see Cumberbatch being like, how do I move my hands again? And I don't know if I can do this. I'm like, oh boy, that's a tall order. Maybe this no origin stories rumor should have been true. So who's up for the role? Really interesting, diverse casting that they've put out here, as they have 3 different ethnicities up for the role. They have Ken Watanabe, they also have Morgan Freeman, and Bill Nighy, who of course has done a lot of franchise work. He's been in the Underworld series, he's been in Pirates of the Caribbean, no stranger to this type of role. All of them are no stranger to this type of role. They've all played the wise, exposition-spewing character in the past. So much so that I think they're as on the nose for this role as Cumberbatch is for Doctor Strange. And I think that Marvel has to think a little outside of the box here. Now, I think it might seem ridiculous to give Marvel any advice at this point. They seemingly can do no wrong. But, they're always in danger of that first misstep. And, you never know if that'll be a domino effect. So I hope they understand. Kevin Feige seems to be like the kind of guy who's on top of this, but then I don't understand the way this movie and Ant-Man are developing. Ant-Man and Doctor Strange, to me, and the Marvel your audience reaction video, the BTC Voice video, is coming out sometime this week. It's almost done, and I think you'll see that Ant-Man and Doctor Strange seem outside of the Marvel plan, and some of you commented on that. And I think that that's because those movies seem a little bit below, not up to par with the other films. They seem almost lost in limbo between film and television. And I'm not quite sure how they're going to succeed, and if these might be the first misfires for Marvel, if Marvel can even have a misfire. The Honest trailer recently and SNL have both commented on the fact that audiences seem to be willing to see anything that Marvel produces. And you wonder how far they can go with that before they break people's trust. That happens to everybody. Every actor at a certain point, even actors and directors, they reach a point where you no longer trust them. Like, think of Nicolas Cage. For a while he was a big audience favorite, but then he just won too many. What will be the straw that breaks the camel's back for Marvel? So I think that these casting choices here are not particularly exciting, and I don't like the idea of a training film. I would much rather see, even if they have to worry about being too much like Sherlock, Benedict Cumberbatch with as Stephen Strange with a really great, exciting Wong character. I'd rather see diversity in the sidekick area than in another a mentor-mentee relationship. But I'm curious what you guys think. Do you think any of these actors are a good choice for the Ancient One? Ken Watanabe, Morgan Freeman, and Bill Nighy. Do you want to see diversity in that role? And what do you think of the idea of a training film? Is that something that you're not as excited about like me? Or are you like, bring it on, I need to learn all that I can about magic, and the Ancient One will be training the audience as well as Doctor Strange? That could work, maybe. That could work. We'll see. All right, maybe he'll give him a tour of the ancient world instead of just how to do the mystical arts. This is going to be very interesting. On a side note, Brian Michael Bendis developed a interesting way to write Doctor Strange in the comics, and that he will kind of have these little captions that talk about the ancient spells, each spell that Doctor Strange casts. It's a lot of work for the writer, usually just like, like, bam, I did a magic spell and XYZ happened because I needed it to in the story. But to actually come up with these names of these spells and a little bit of background information on each one, it's a lot of work, and I'm curious to see if Marvel will put that much work into the film. If they do, it might really pay off for them. So I also, for the third story, I really want to talk about Benedict Cumberbatch. I've been ragging on him a lot in this role. I think that it's a risky role for him. It's a little too on the nose. But I just want to take a moment to step back and appreciate Benedict Cumberbatch as a professional working in the entertainment business, because he is such an amazing professional. And the reason I bring this up, I've interviewed him twice now on the red carpet. He is wonderful. He does as many interviews as he can. Even when you're only allowed to get one question, he knows to keep talking, to give you a lot of material. He's really a stand-up guy. Such a wonderful person. And then also he does so much to promote these movies. For instance, on the Colbert Report, and I've put a link in the video description so you can watch it yourself, he has Smaug as a guest that Stephen Colbert interviews as his, conservative character. And Cumberbatch had to do the voice work for this. And he really is game. He just does a fantastic job. He doesn't phone it in. He does it with as much gusto as his actual performance in the film. And he does some great jokes, and he's willing to make some really, some of them are quite controversial, but, Cumberbatch goes there. And I have tremendous respect for that. I have tremendous respect for his willingness to try new things. Doctor Strange, to me, isn't a new thing for him, but I think, who turns down a role in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, as I've said before? I'm looking at you, Joaquin Phoenix. But I think that one of the great things about Benedict Cumberbatch is what a team player he will be for Marvel. Look at his willingness to promote the Hobbit films, and he's not even in them, personally. It's just a motion capture performance. And I think that he's sorely missed from this film, actually. My favorite thing about The Desolation of Smaug was I'd never seen such a wonderfully realized dragon in a film. That was really, truly a character in its own right. And a lot of that goes not just only to the animation team that animates Smaug, but to Cumberbatch's performance. So that he would be willing to do this Colbert Report thing is just phenomenal. And I think that where he'll be a secret weapon for Marvel is his willingness and, I think, excitement, because he's a fan of these things himself, as you can see from his various Graham Norton appearances. It's a very popular talk show in the UK, for those of you who haven't heard of it. These clips are all over YouTube, though. But he's only going to go to the bat for Marvel. He's someone who will do wonderful things at the comic conventions and for press interviews, that the kind of things that gets people excited about seeing these movies. For instance, for The Imitation Game, he did a wonderful, MTV asked him to do a bunch of impressions really quickly. And a lot of actors would shy away from that, especially if it was sprung on them, but not Cumberbatch. Cumberbatch, he's always up for something, even if, it's a surprise at the last minute, and that's commendable. So I'm rooting for him. I really hope this works out, and I hope it does work out so that other actors are inspired to be as hands-on and as game as he is, because I think it's just more fun for everybody. I think it adds a whole nother layer of fun and excitement to a film property when the people who are in it are just as excited as those who are watching it, because it just kind of puts us all together in a room with the same goal. Whereas, sometimes the people on screen, their goal is to make money for their careers. It's not to make a great movie. So I think that Cumberbatch, we'll see if he's the right match for this material. We'll see if the material is any good. But I think that we can all know that he will approach this role with tremendous enthusiasm and professionalism, and not just the role, but promoting the film itself and being part of the Marvel brand. All right, so the viewer question of the day comes from Sketch Leah F. And Sketch Leah F says, question: Hey Grace, you mentioned in your movie review for Night at the Museum 3 and several other times that trailers for films nowadays are the entire movie in a nutshell, and that the film it was advertising is the extended version of the trailer. Who is in charge of approving the edited trailers for the films? The director or the studio's promotional department? Can you tell us the process? Thanks, and because of your channel that I have been watching for several years, I aspire to be a filmmaker one day. That's wonderful, Leah. Thank you so much for your question. And I think it's fantastic that you are interested in becoming a filmmaker. And now you're going to know a little bit more about how a trailer is made. Now, as for the comment that I made about movies just being an extended version of the trailer, what I mean is that there isn't much more story that's hinted at, that's shown in the trailer. Usually a trailer is supposed to give you just a general idea of what a movie is about, and then when you watch the film, it goes into significant more depth in terms of the story and character development. But I've been seeing a lot of trailers, a lot of movies these days, for instance, The Most Violent Year, where there is not anything really beyond the trailer. What you see in the trailer is exactly what you get in the movie. They don't expand upon it at all. And that's very frustrating, because you're like, I didn't need to watch this movie, I have seen the trailer. And I'm hoping, my comment about Night at the Museum 3 is that there was so much more saved for the actual movie, that it was a real treat, that you didn't feel like you were being taken advantage of, which I think sometimes is the case. Now, they've usually shown things from the end of a movie in trailers for decades. If you go, whenever you rent a Blu-ray or you buy a Blu-ray or a DVD, they often have extras, and you can see the original trailer for the film. And once you've seen the movie, you're like, that's crazy you showed that scene. That's at the end of the movie. How could you do that? But you'll see it's been a common practice, and it hasn't hurt film or people's enjoyment of it. And I think that the real issue is there more in the movie? I think that's where we can kind of draw the line in the sand. But as for the process of how a trailer is made, a director, unless a director is a producer, they don't have very much say at all in how a trailer is produced. Often they're too busy because the movie is currently being made. Movies are a huge endeavor. They're an incredible amount of work on multiple levels. And things, in order for them to be made in a reasonable amount of time, it still takes a couple of, like sometimes a year, or you'll see a movie like Batman v Superman takes a couple of years to make. So things are happening simultaneously. Now, I want to recount a story I've told before about John Carter of Mars, the John Carter film that Andrew Stanton directed. And he was coming over from Pixar, and he brought his whole team with him. So he really had nobody on the team there making this live-action film that had any experience making a live-action film. Whereas Brad Bird over in Mission Impossible, when he made Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, he had a very experienced second unit and people assisting him so that they could kind of, lead him along and fill him in on things he might not be aware of. Now, one of the things that Andrew Stanton wasn't aware of, and something that he also was unfortunate that he had a new head of publicity at Disney at the time that he was making this movie. She was having her own problems. She visited the set, I believe they said in white pants, and if you might recall, it's a very dirty, deserty film, and that was a great joke, very, very, very catty, very high school, but that's how an industry, particularly like the entertainment industry, can be. And so she was beleaguered herself and really wasn't in the position to be giving good advice. But anyway, Andrew Stanton didn't know that you have to do your big special effects shots first. You have to shoot those sequences first so they can be used in the trailer. And the best example of that is ID4, where they shot very early on in the production schedule the blowing up of the White House. So it could be in the trailer and get people excited about it. But unfortunately, Andrew Stanton was unaware of this and didn't shoot his big sequences first so they could be in the trailer. And John Carter, I think many people who've seen it, myself included, will tell you it's a pretty good movie, and it's unfortunate that it did not get the recognition or the attention it deserves. Is it a perfect, brilliant film? No, but it's very good and it's a lot of fun, and certainly didn't deserve to crash and burn as it did. But there was a problem with the trailer, and that was a problem that wasn't just the way the trailer was cut or the sequences they chose, but a misunderstanding of how to make a movie. So that's how a director can contribute to the trailer, even if they're not in charge of greenlighting it and approving it. They can make sure that the correct material is available for that trailer. So when you're making a shooting schedule, you should be thinking, what needs to be available to promote this movie? Now, the person who's in charge of the trailer is largely the publicity department at the studio. They put it together. Sometimes they'll hire a trailer house to cut it for them, but they're overseeing it and giving notes. And often the producer will give notes, especially very powerful producers like Harvey Weinstein, Scott Rudin, Joel Silver, Jerry Bruckheimer, obviously. They are intimately involved in the trailer. But again, the director's supposed to be busy making their movies. And so unless they're a hands-on producer, they're not going to be involved in that aspect of it. And then as far as giving away too much, the real goal is just to make sure this seems like a must-see. And ideally, there's so much in your movie, you can't give it all away in two minutes, 2.5 minutes, because there just simply isn't enough room. So anyway, that's my answer to your question, Sketchlia. I hope it was helpful. Thank you so much for asking it and for your continued viewership and your now interaction. I think that's fantastic. And good luck with your goals. And I hope, again, this was helpful. So thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories and the viewer question. Anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.